Hello, I'm John Adams, editor of Digital Photo, and welcome to this Photoshop Made Easy video lesson. We're going to take a look at the various methods you can use to add a warm-up effect to your images. Now, if we take this particular landscape as an example, it looks okay. There's quite nice weather, quite nice lighting, but it's rather cool. And if we look at the warm version instead, you can see that looks a lot better. It's much more attractive, and adding some warmth to a picture is something that is really worthwhile. It used to be done by using warm-up filters, either 81 series or 85 series filters, and these actually fitted over the front of the lens so you could add the warm-up effect when you're shooting on film. With digital cameras you can do that, of course, if you want to. You can use optical warm-up filters, but it's actually much easier and much more controllable to use Photoshop or Elements methods to warm up your pictures instead. So there's the cool version, there's the warm version, and I think you'll agree the warm version always wins. Now, some methods of warming up pictures are only available in the full version of Photoshop, so I'll be covering those along with the methods that are available for all kinds of different versions of Photoshop. So without further ado, let's have a look at 5 different methods that you can use to warm up your pictures. Color balance is an image adjustment that's only found in the full version of Photoshop. To get there, you can go to Image, Adjustments, and choose Color Balance, or you can hit the shortcut Control and B, or, as I'm going to do, you can use an adjustment layer. All you need to do is have your Layers palette up on screen, click on the adjustment layer icon, and choose Color Balance from the list. This brings up the Color Balance palette. And it can be a little complicated at first because you've got shadows, midtones, highlights, you've got 3 sliders to move for each of those, and you've got a preserve luminosity button. So to stop it all getting confusing, what I'm going to do is give you a general recipe that you can use to warm up pictures using this particular palette. First of all, make sure that preserve luminosity is not ticked, and make sure that preview is ticked. The preview gives you a live rendition of the changes on your image, so you want that ticked all the time. What we're going to do is start with highlights, and we're going to move the cyan red slider towards red. So about 20 in that should do the trick, and you can see the redness coming through into the highlights. And then in the yellow blue slider, we're going to put in a negative amount of blue or a positive amount of yellow. So about the same, about -20 there. So we have a diagonal line across the sliders in the highlights. Next we move on to the midtones, and here's where you can add a little bit more red. So we're just going to tweak that a touch and just take the cyan red slider to about +5. We'll leave the others exactly as they are. Next thing, we click on the shadows, and we're going to add a little bit of blue to the very darkest tones in the scene. Not too much, just about +8 or thereabouts should do the trick. That's enough blue in the shadows. And now that's done, we're just going to use the preview just to toggle it on and off to see the difference. And you can see there's a nice warmth coming through there. This looks rather cool. This sort of a midday shot looks quite cool in comparison. And if we just use that preview, we've got a nice warm-up effect. Not too loud, not too aggressive, just about right. So try that recipe as a starting point for your warm-up. But bear in mind that your image will be different, so you may need to adjust the settings, particularly in the highlights, for that particular effect. So highlights, +20 in the red, -20 in the blue. Midtones, a little bit of red in there, about +5. And then shadows, a little bit of blue. And that should give you a pretty decent result. You can try it with and without the preserved luminosity, but this does boost contrast a touch, so you're generally better off without it. But of course you can always try it with and without and see which one looks the best for your particular image. Once you're happy with the overall result, click OK, and there's a great method for the users of the full version of Photoshop with color balance. Variations, or color variations as it's known in Elements, is available in all versions of Photoshop. And to get there, you go to Image, Adjustments, and choose Variations right down the bottom of the list. Or in Elements, you go to Enhance, Adjust Color, Color Variations. Click on that, and it launches this rather interesting looking palette, which gives you a before and after, the original and current pic, and a load of different boxes in kind of a ring around effect. The Elements one is a little bit different, but not so different that you won't know what's going on. The first thing you want to do is actually move the Fine Coarse slider to the left. Try and get it one notch up from fine. Now in Elements, that's called the Adjust Color Intensity slider. All this does is give you either a subtle effect if it's over to the left, or a very dramatic effect if it's over to the right. So by keeping it towards the left, we make small changes rather than big changes. Now this works very much like the color balance method we've just seen, because you've got shadows, midtones and highlights to choose from, and then you can either boost or decrease the amount of red, green and blue in each of those tonal ranges. Now for a standard warm-up effect, once you've got your fine core slider set, go for highlights first, make sure that slider is just one notch in from the left, and then click 4 times on the more red icon. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now that's going to add lots of red to the highlights. Then still on highlights, we're going to add some yellow, or decrease the blue in other words. So we go 1, 2, 3 clicks on there. Once we've done that, we move on to the midtones, so click on the midtones button. And then to get a little more red in midtones, 2 clicks on more red will do the trick nicely. And you can see in the preview window there, it's doing the job quite nicely and bringing those warm colours back through. Finally, we move on to shadows, so select shadows, and then to add a little bit of blue, we're just going to click once on the more blue setting. Now that's done, all we have to do is click OK, and there you have your changes. If you want to see what it looks like, you can always go to Edit and undo the changes you've made to see the before, and then you can redo them to see the after. So that's a method you can use in either Photoshop or Elements using variations. It's a bit more cumbersome than the color balance method. That's the preferred method. If you're going to do it this way, then use color balance in the full version of Photoshop. But if you're using Elements and don't have access to color balance, give variations a try, because it is quite an effective way of adding a warm-up effect. Curves is a fantastic method for creating warm-up effects, but you need to be quite delicate. So if you're a little bit aggressive and a bit strong-willed in the way you use sliders and controls in Photoshop, then maybe keep away from this one. To open up the Curves palette, you can go to Image, Adjustments and choose Curves, or you can hit the shortcut Control and M, or as I'm going to do, you can use an adjustment layer. So that way you click on the half black, half white circle in the Layers palette and choose Curves from the list. There's our Curves palette. What we have is a diagonal line, and this represents the red, green and blue all in one go, because in channel it says RGB. What we can do though is actually click on that RGB and select red from the list. Once we've done that, all we need to do is push the curve up just a touch, and you can see the redness coming through into the image. That's more than enough. That's probably a bit too much actually, but we'll overdo it for the sake of this illustration. There we go, that's our red curve adjusted. A little bit of boost there. Then we switch to the blue curve, and of course if we push it up we're going to increase blue. So if we pull it down, we increase the negative of blue, which is yellow, and that gives us a nice warm effect. Probably a little bit less than the red, just to get that nice amber tone coming through. There we go, that looks pretty good. And once you've done that, you've made your colour adjustments. But if you wish, you can also drop back into the RGB and you can just add a little S-curve just to boost contrast a touch more, if your image needs that. And there you can see that's looking really nice with a lovely warm-up effect coming through and a little extra kick to contrast as well. So that's quick, simple and really effective. And if we just toggle the preview icon, we can see the before and after difference. So there's our before image looking rather cold and rather bland, and then we try it with curves and look at that, looking fantastic. That's one of my favourite methods of warming up an image. Curves or colour balance, really, really effective. The photo filter is available in Photoshop and Elements, and in many ways it should provide the best method for warming up a picture because it emulates a traditional filter's effect. So let's see how we get there. Well, you go to Image, Adjustments and choose Photo Filter from the list. There's no direct shortcut there, but if you want to use it as an adjustment layer, which I will, you just click on the adjustment layer icon and there it is in the list, Photo Filter. And that's the same for Photoshop or for Elements. Click on that and we have our photo filter. Now, in the filter box here, you can click on that and select all sorts of different ones. We've got 3 warm-up filters, 81, LBA and 85. So you can pick any of these, any one you'd like to try. Let's try the 85 in this example. What we've got underneath is a density slider, and this basically gives you the strength of the particular filter. It defaults to 25%, but if we ramp it up a bit, we get more and more warmth coming into the image until it goes crazy. So I think the best setting is probably somewhere around 50%, and you can try it with and without preserved luminosity. Obviously your image is going to get darker the stronger the filter becomes, but you sometimes get a bit more warmth coming through. So try it with and without and see which works best for your particular image. Once you've made those changes, try the preview button, tick it to see the before and after. There we go. And you can decide whether you like the effect. Now I think because you can't easily mix up the effects with the photo filter by adding a bit more red or a bit more yellow to the overall mixture, then it doesn't give the same sort of flexibility that you get with the other methods. So it's not my favourite, but it is something that's worth trying if you want the simplicity of using an optical filter in a software variant. So that's the photo filter, and as I say, it's available in Photoshop or Elements. We'll now move on to our last method of creating a warm-up effect, and this is available also in Photoshop or Elements and uses a palette that should be very, very familiar. Well, most people don't think about levels as being something you can use to create warm-up or color balance effects, but it is. A little earlier we saw how curves could be used to actually create a warm-up effect, and of course levels in many ways is just a simplified version of the curves palette. Let's open up levels and see what we're talking about. There's various ways to do this. You can go to Image, Adjustments, Levels, use the shortcut Control and L, or indeed you can use the adjustment layer route. Just click on the adjustment layer icon and choose Levels from the list. What we've got is a histogram. This is the graph, the distribution of pixels and tones within the image, and we've got 3 sliders underneath it. We've got our black slider, our midtone or gamma slider, and the white point slider. Now, just like in curves, we can click where it says RGB and select red from the list. And then if we move our midtone slider, our gamma slider, we can add more red to the image by moving it to the left, or we can reduce the amount of red, i.e. add cyan to the image by moving it to the right. So if we drag it to the left and get it so it's to around about 1.30, something around there should be okay as a starting point. Go to about 1.3 on the input levels, and then before clicking OK, just switch channels to the blue and do the opposite. So we need to push this towards yellow, so this time we're going to go to about, something like 0.85 should be okay, something around there. We have a nice yellow tone coming in to mix with the red we've just created. Now before we quit out, we can have a look at what we've done. We can toggle the preview button, so we click that on and off. You can see there a nice rich warm-up effect. I think we might go a little bit further on the red with that one, so we can just swap back to the red channel. Maybe add a touch more by just dragging it leftwards. That's enough there. So I've got 1.37 in the red. In the blue, I've got 0.85. I click OK, and then we've got a lovely warm-up effect created very quickly and very simply by using levels. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. There's 5 different methods, different ways you can create warm-up effects to your images. So give them all a whirl and see which ones work best for you. There are no hard and fast rules about which you use, but you will find them very, very handy, particularly if you like taking landscapes, because a bit of extra warmth injected into a landscape will work wonders. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.